Okay, good morning everybody in Europe and good afternoon everybody in Asia. And welcome to our webinar today, which is entitled Opportunities and IPR in the Philippines, Construction and Infrastructure. This webinar is brought to you by the EU Philippines Business Network and the Southeast Asia IPR SME Helpdesk. And it is also my pleasure to welcome here today Mr. Fido Ventura from the EU Philippines Business Network and Mr. Michael Royber from Royal Cargo, Mr. Edmund Jason Baranda from Baranda and Associates, and all of these three will speak today. My name is Mitchell Smulders, and I am a project executive for the Southeast Asia IPR SME Helpdesk, and I will be in charge of today's webinar. Not only will I moderate the webinar, but also the Q&A sessions. So throughout the presentation, we are looking forward to a lively discussion with all of you. So please get in touch with us by typing in any questions or comments you have using the question box on the screen. If you look at the screen in front of you, you see that there is a panel, and you can use the question box to type directly any remarks you might have. We will deal with them only at the end of both presentations. During the Q&A session, where I will read out each question to the presenter, who will then give a short feedback on his or her thoughts. Also, I would like to let you know that we are recording today's webinar, and it will be available for download from the webinar section of our website in the upcoming week, earliest probably on Monday or Tuesday. Then also I would like to remind you that to get the most optimal experience of today's webinar, please make sure you are using a stable Wi-Fi or otherwise internet connection. This can be either from your laptop or from your telephone, but it's really important for the sound and image quality to have a stable connection. If your connection is shaky, this might really affect the sound quality you have today. However, during the recording of this webinar, this does not affect the sound quality at all. So if you have trouble listening to the webinar, please also make sure to look at the recording that will be uploaded later next week. So a brief introduction for those of you who are not familiar with the Southeast Asia IPR SME Helpdesk. We are a project co-funded by the European Union, and therefore our services are free to European businesses and organizations like, for example, European embassies and chambers of commerce. We provide jargon-free, first-line, confidential advice on intellectual property issues related to Southeast Asia. And you can see the range of our services on the slide in front of you, which include, but are certainly not limited to, our inquiry helpline, which allows you to ask us any IP-related question and receive a reply within 3 working days, or training events, which are held throughout the year across Southeast Asia and Europe, as well as our IP materials, such as guides, newsletters, case study catalogs, and infographics, which are all available for download from our website, www.ipr-hub.eu, where you can also find interactive e-learning modules and the events calendar. With this short introduction, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Fido Ventura of the EU Philippines Business Network, and he will briefly introduce you all to the EPBN, its services and upcoming events. So Fido, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. This is Fidel Ventura. Just a brief overview of the EU Philippines Business Network before we start. Similarly to the IPR SME Helpdesk, the EPBN is also co-funded by the EU. And we are being implemented, the whole network, is composed of a consortium of European chambers here in the Philippines, eight in total. The EPBN provides a major support for European SMEs, especially those who are interested in exporting or investing in the Philippines. In addition, we also provide an integrated business support for European enterprises here in the country. Next slide. Some of our key services include providing advocacy services to European companies in terms of their issues that they would like to be addressed. We provide a coordinated business support for companies as well, and a customized government relations and business development support into their market entry. And regularly, we provide updates of trade and investment developments between the EU, the Philippines, and the ASEAN region. Next. And these are our major partner chambers: the Belgian Filipino Business Club, British Chamber of the Philippines, the European Chamber of Commerce, the French Chamber, the German Chamber, the Italian Chamber of Commerce, La Cámara, which is the Spanish Chamber, and the Nordic Chamber. Next slide. These are our upcoming business missions to Manila. Relevant to today's webinar, we will have a trade mission to Energy Smart Forum and Innovation and Infrastructure Congress this coming October 26th to 27th. And then there will be also a construction and infrastructure trade mission to Philconstruct in early 2018. So watch out for these relevant business trade missions for yourselves. And in addition, we shall have the agriculture trade mission on September 27 to 28, and then there will be also the EU Philippines Business Summit taking place on October. So we will build a multi-sectoral trade mission around this event, plus the environment trade mission coming up in November. And then there will also be a healthcare trade mission to Medical Philippines Expo in November. Next slide. And these are our contact details. Our website is www.epbn.ph. Our email addresses are here in this slide, so please feel free to get in touch with us on any inquiries regarding doing business in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you, Fidel. And for our next speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Roiber. Mr. Michael Roiber is the CEO of Royal Cargo and a chairman of the EPBN Infra Transport Committee. He has been in the Philippines since his early 20s and has built up his company from a small firm in the late 70s to the large company that it is today. Mr. Michael Roiber also serves as the Vice Chairman of the Integrity Initiative and is also the Chairman for Infrastructure and Transportation Committee for the European Union Philippines Business Network, and has previously served as President of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. So after this brief introduction, Mr. Michael Roiber will take the floor and tell you everything about his experience in the construction and infrastructure sector in the Philippines. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Well, thank you very much for a very nice introduction. And sorry, I clicked one button too little. I'm Michael Roiber. I'm the Group CEO of Royal Cargo Inc., a leader in Philippine logistics. Royal Cargo is active in most parts of Asia and ASEAN and in other important countries in the world. Logistics can only flourish when infrastructure is available, and I'm referring to land, sea, and air infrastructure. This is the reason why I'm talking to you today, trying to convince you to get involved in the infrastructure and construction opportunities in the Philippines. Could we go to the next slide? Why the Philippines? Well, first of all, and that's not in my original text, I have been in the Philippines for the past 40 years, and we were successfully developing business in this country. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity this country has given us to grow and prosper. The Philippines is in the heart of ASEAN and ASEAN is becoming more and more attractive to international traders and investors. The Philippines has a very large young population of more than 100 million people. Actually, I think on last count it was 115 million people already. And the average age is a bit above 24 years of age. The Philippine GDP growth has been between 6.5 and 7% during the last few years and is estimated to continue at this economic expansion. Underlying that success, by the way, is the export, largely the export of labor, but not only export of labor, but also export of services. The so-called BPO and business process management companies were highly successful in the last 10 years, having created more than 2 million jobs, which is driving the growth. Next slide, please. What are local and foreign investors looking for? Healthcare, and this includes the building of hospitals and health centers. Second, energy. The growing economy needs more and more power, and consequently more and more power plants are built, involving coal, natural gas, and renewable energy, from solar to wind to hydro, and very importantly in this country, geothermal. In reality, the Philippines has quite a good power mix and is a country with a high percentage of renewable energy. Number 3, ICT, BPM, KPM. I mentioned that already as being one of the growth factors of the Philippines. Given the fact that the Philippines is a very young population and that we have plenty English speakers, business processing and knowledge processing for the rest of the world has become a major sector, employing today about, as I said, between 1.5 to 2 million people, and the target is 3 million jobs. Number 4, infrastructure. The Philippines has ignored the building of infrastructure over many years that is paying the price for this in form of lack of infrastructure. The new government is making every effort to change this and is expected to invest 15 billion euro in this sector this year, and up to 2022, 150 billion euro. So it's a huge target. Number 5, manufacturing. The Philippines has attracted manufacturing operations from all over the world, especially from Japan, North America, Australia, and Europe in so-called export processing zones. The Philippines is operating special economic zones that offer substantial benefits. Lastly, tourism. With more than 7,000 beautiful islands, the market is expanding. Please take note that all sectors require construction and infrastructure. Next slide, please. What do foreign investors have to be aware of when implementing projects? Basically, what I'm showing on this slide are the parties you will have to deal with. On the left side, I also indicated that parties that are not necessarily your friends, like rebels, the new People's Army. From my own experience, I can tell you that we investors have to deal and can deal with them. On the right side, many of the partners you will have to deal with. I mentioned the excellent performance of Philippine Economic Zone Authority for Manufacturers and Exporters a minute ago. And let me highlight integrity. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Integrity Initiative, Inc., that is fighting corruption with the important aim to create a level playing field. Our target is both government and the private sector, covering purchases and bidding processes, which are so important when it comes to investments into infrastructure and construction. The idea of the ECCP initiative, integrity initiative, is to bring the private sector onto the stage as not bribing, doing their business with integrity. And I can tell you from personal experiences having to deal with the Bureau of Customs, which in past history has been considered a a government entity with not much integrity, that if the private sector is not bribing, it is very much possible and doable to do business in the Philippines without paying bribes. Next slide. Why should you invest in these sectors? The argument of Budget Secretary Diokno, who is making the money for infrastructure available, is clear. More than 5% of GDP has to be invested in infrastructure per annum for years to come. And let me highlight two fields: roads, rails, bridges, seaports, airports. And as indicated earlier, hospitals, power plants, etc. The real estate is booming. Housing, low cost and high end. High rise for residential and offices. Offices especially for the BPM and KPM sector I mentioned before, and the growing sector, online gaming. If you visit Manila, the capital of the Philippines, and you visit the business district, which is called Makati, you will be amazed to see a second Makati which has developed over the past 10 years. High-rise, an environment which almost looks like Singapore, driven by the 1.5 to 2 million jobs created in the BPM sector. And all of these buildings in that subsector of Makati have been constructed during the last 10 years. Next slide. Opportunities for EU business. For large players, the door is wide open as long as the limitations in ownership and operations are clearly understood. The Philippines is operating on a so-called negative list, meaning to say there is a list of businesses where foreign investment is restricted to 60% Filipino, 40% foreigners. There are very few where that limitation goes further. Anything which is not in this negative list is open for 100% investment by foreigners. For small and medium-sized enterprises, the market opportunities are limited to specialized technologies as subcontractors. Next slide. I hope I have convinced you to take part in this sector. The question is now how to gain access to the market. I can only recommend to get information on projects, and EPBN can do that for you. You can get in touch with them, you can ask your questions, and EPBN will give you any information available in the market. Then second, decide what kind of projects are of interest to you. Then find out whether you can do it alone or not. In general, partnership with local partners are advisable, but you have to be very careful about the partners you choose. And again, introductions by EU delegation or EPBN or the European Chamber of Commerce is helpful in that respect. And decide whether you want to be a lead contractor or prefer to operate as a subcontractor with less risks. Next slide. As you enter the market, with what kind of stakeholders do you have to deal with? I mentioned a few, from national to local government, from partners to banks, from civil society to skilled people you need to employ. Next. The good news is there is a huge market potential. Local construction companies cannot handle all the projects that are going to be implemented. New technologies are needed that only foreign contractors can provide. Just to share with you a good news, our own experience just recently. A German company, I can name the company, Dermalog, from Germany, has won an 800 million peso supply contract for the issuance of driver's licenses in the Philippines. There was a big backlog of that because of lack of technology. And the German company won that contract, is now in the process of implementing it. Okay, this has nothing to do with construction, but it is a nice, a nice experience to see that European companies are succeeding here in the Philippines. The not so good news is there are plenty of regulations in the country. You have quite some red tape, but yet on the other side, I'm a German, and when I go to Germany, I can see also a lot of red tape in bureaucracy. If you are focused now on infrastructure projects, there are plenty of right-of-ways issues when infrastructure is built, and that may lead to delays. That has to be factored in when planning your involvement. You will need local partners to be successful, and again, important is that you choose the right partners. And you will be faced with plenty of bureaucracy, like in some other countries. The good news is that you will find people that can assist you to circumnavigate and tackle those risks. Next slide. Let me conclude by highlighting that if you want to build, talk plenty first. Invest the time to plan very well. I have hopefully demonstrated the business opportunities. I have outlined the good news and some of the not so good news. The devil is in the detail when you look at the not so good news. I certainly invite you to take advantage of the opportunities in your sector in the Philippines. I strongly advise you to talk to as many stakeholders as possible in the country before you enter the market and invest here. EPBN and I are in standby to assist you in the market, find the right partners, enter into the right kind of contracts, and avoid as much risk as possible. Thank you. That was my presentation.
Thank you, Michael, for all these insights. Next, our speaker is Mr. Edmund Baranda. He is an IP lawyer with over 15 years of experience in the Philippines and is a qualified patent agent with a bachelor degree in molecular biology and biotechnology. He went on to take his Masters of Law in both the Philippines and in the US, if I'm saying this correct. And is finally highlight I would like to mention is that he's a member of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines and New York. The floor is all yours, Edmund.
In the construction industry, IP is not much of a priority. This is based on my experience with working with construction companies. But we always tell them that they should be aware of intellectual property. I mean, from the get-go, like choosing a name or a logo for your company, you should be aware that you are not violating any IP rights. And if you're in the business of providing construction technologies or developing construction technologies, then definitely you should be aware of IP and you should know how to protect your IP. Because if you have your IP, then you can protect yourself against infringers, so those who will violate your patent rights, for example. And obviously, inventors will only invest in a company when their IP is protected, because you will need a lot of money to invest in a company. You will use a lot of money to invest in a company, and that investor will of course want to recoup their investment. And the only way to do that is if the technology that they are investing in is protected by intellectual property. Next slide, please.
You can see the slide now?
Yes, I can see it now. There are several intellectual property rights, but there are 4 that are listed on your screen right now. But since we have limited time, I'll be focusing more on patents, utility models, and industrial designs. But copyrights is also relevant in the construction industry, particularly those who are involved in architectural works or interior design work. Those are protected by copyrights. Trademarks will be your logos, your company names, and trade secrets will be let's say construction techniques that you employ in your company, which you do not want to share with your competitors. Next slide, please. So a patent, you get a patent when you have an invention which solves a particular human problem. So the advantage of a patent is that you have a monopoly. It's a bad word. Some people say it's a bad word because it's monopoly, but it is what it is. You have a monopoly to use your invention or to license that invention for 20 years. So you exclude others from using that invention, and only you can exploit that invention. But of course, you make money of it by licensing it to interested companies. But for your invention to be patentable, there are 3 requirements. First is it should be new. It should be novel. It should not have been published before you file your patent application. Second is it should involve an inventive step. That means that our IP code says it should not be obvious to a person skilled in the art, but perhaps a simple way of putting this is it should be tricky. It should be clever. So it's not obvious to someone in the construction industry. The third requirement, it should be industrially applicable. And obviously, if you use it for the construction industry, then you already comply with that requirement. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of patentable inventions in the construction industry, and I've had a chance to work on these inventions. So it's a new process for making cement. So a cement it's a stronger cement, or a new wall construction system. This could be in the form of it's a fence system with prefabricated parts and are assembled on site. So I've worked on this particular patent. Or it could be a new method for installing concretes to reduce cracks. I'll be showing you a patent document later on, so you'll have a better idea. Next slide, please. But not all inventions are patentable. There's an exhaustive list on your slide right now. But the bottom line here is you don't want to stifle research and development. So you don't want to patent discovery, scientific theories, and mathematical methods because these are your building blocks. Anything that's contrary to public order or morality, well, that's like the catch-all provision. But I just want to point out that for programs for computers, which softwares, there are softwares that are used in the construction industry. Some people are surprised that you can patent that. Well, it's a policy that was adopted by Congress that we don't want to patent software, but it is protected by copyright. But this is a debate whether we should include software as a patentable invention. But right now, software is just protected by copyright. Next slide, please. If your invention is not very clever, so it's obvious to a person skilled in the art, you have an alternative, which is to protect it as a utility model. And in the construction industry, we've seen a few of these, particularly like prefabricated systems. There's nothing really clever or tricky about the technologies that they develop, but it's still new, and they felt that there's a market for those products, so they opted for what we call a utility model registration. The requirements are just be novel or new, and it's industrially applicable. So we recommend this kind of protection for what we call low-level technologies that could be obsolete in a few years, because the protection here is just for 7 years. So if you foresee that the technology that you develop will be obsolete in the next couple of years, but right now it addresses a particular need, then we would recommend a utility model registration. Next slide, please. Another type of protection, we call these patents quote unquote because strictly speaking they're not patents, but in the olden days we used to call them patents, is protecting the ornamental design of an object. So a very good example of this would be, at least as far relevant to the construction industry, would be tile designs. So or furniture as well. So you could have these designs protected via an industrial design registration. The term is short, it's 5 years, but it's renewable twice. So we have a total of 15 years to exploit this industrial design registration. Next slide, please. Here are some examples. I apologize, these are not tiles, but this is just to illustrate what an industrial design registration looks like. So you probably recognize the shapes of these the shapes of these bottles and their brands. The one on the left, it's a Gatorade bottle, but the owners of Gatorade decided also to register the shape of the Gatorade bottle. The one in the center, I think it's another tea-based drink. But the one on the right, it's not an industrial design registration. Those of you, I think, would readily recognize that it's a Coke bottle. So Coke has become so famous, that both the trademark and then the bottle of Coke, that Coke decided to register it as a trademark. So it's the shape of the bottle. They registered it as a trademark, and they did that because trademark virtually is forever because it doesn't expire. Industrial design registration is only good up to 15 years, but if you've come up with a shape that that already identifies it's a very distinctive shape and already identifies your product or service, then you could register it as a trademark. Next slide, please. So once you have your rights registered, you now want, how do you enforce that? We have quite solid enforcement laws in the Philippines, and this is how you enforce them. Next slide, please. Again, I'll just be specifically talking about patent enforcement of patent rights, but the things that I will be discussing may also be applied to copyright and trademark enforcement. But for patents, I think what's unique here is that the first offense is just you can only file a civil action for infringement. It's not a criminal act. So in that way, it's not the pressure for the infringer to comply with your demands may not be as strong as compared to a copyright or a trademark enforcement, because of the first violation of your trademark or copyright rights, it is a criminal act. So, but in the case of patents, it's the repetition of the infringement which makes it a criminal action. The reason for this is, and also through experience, we know that sometimes you don't really know that a certain patent already, a certain invention or technology is already covered by patent. So you accidentally adopted that technology in your business or in your company, and so there's just to cover those situations where you're an innocent, what we call an innocent infringer, then the first infringement is just a civil action and not criminal in nature. You can go for search and seizures. So this will actually cripple your competitor in case that your competitor is using your technology, because you could seize all the equipment that they're using to produce the infringing product. And this goes the same. The processes that I described also are applicable when you want to enforce your rights with regard to your utility model industrial design registrations. Next slide, please. Maybe just so that you could understand more clearly how patent rights are enforced here in the Philippines, let me briefly discuss a case, this particular case where I was asked to act as an amicus curiae. So I'm like the consultant or the expert, quote unquote, of the court to guide them in deciding this case. So the patent is a table form support for concrete forming. In the next slide, I'll show you how it looks. So it's basically a technology that's used for on-site concrete forming. Now the owner, the parties are both Filipino companies. The owner of the patent claimed that the defendant construction company copied the table form support that is covered by his patent. Next slide, please. This is the drawing on your left is the concrete form. So this contraption is used to form concretes, And the words on your right are what we call the claims of a patent. There's a lot of jargon there, a lot of technical words there, but what I want you to understand is that a claim is like a title. If you have seen a land title, so it's like a bound. It defines a boundary. For land titles, it defines a certain geographical space. For claims, you use it's the similar concept. So you use words to form like a fence around a certain technology. So the way the owner of this technology patented their inventions, but by saying that this table form support system has 1, 2, 3, 4, and so etc. There are actually 14 elements there. And they listed the parts, the individual parts of these table form support system. I want you to take note of the words characterized and then the words double wall channel because that's relevant. Next slide, please. So again, I pointed out that the claim of the patent has, at least the main claim has 14 elements or components. Now, if we're going to determine whether a product infringes the patent, all these 14 elements or parts of that product should be found in the infringing product. And another thing to remember is that when you use the word characterized in a claim, that means that all the elements that appeared before the word characterized means it's part of prior art. That means that it's old technology. And then anything that comes after the word characterized, that means those are the improvements. Those are the things that you introduced that made your invention patentable. So it's inventive. So this is the new and the inventive parts of your invention. What we found was that the defendant's product has a single-walled channel. Again, these are technical matters stuff, but a takeaway here is that unfortunately the patent, the claims of the patent use the word double-walled. Since the defendant's product uses a single-walled channel, then there's no one-to-one correspondence between the defendant's product and then the patented invention. So the court ruled there that there's no infringement. I'm citing this because in a patent infringement case, it really boils down to how you worded your claims and how and enforcement may be difficult because of a poorly worded claim. If your claim is very detailed, it's very easy for an infringer to go around it by, taking away some of the elements or slightly changing some parts of his product so that it's not covered by your patent. So that's the takeaway there. It's difficult for you to enforce your patents if your claims are quite weak. Next slide, please. So watch outs and tips. Again, even if you don't produce any technologies, if you're a construction company, you should still register your marks or your logos because who knows? You might be a big company later on. You might develop goodwill in your products and services. Then it's worthwhile to have your name registered as a trademark. And again, if you're involved in development of construction technologies, then you should register your patents, utility models, or industrial designs. Remember as well that in the Philippines, you should use the mark to maintain your trademark registration. If you have trade secrets, if you don't want to disclose your technology, then that's possible. You could protect it as a trade secret. But the challenge there is you should employ mechanisms to keep your trade secret a secret. So the key tip there is to ensure that your employees execute non-disclosure agreements, and whenever you deal with possible investors, then you also ask them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, of course with penalties. Also in the arbitration industry, there's an arbitral body, it's the CIAC, which is very useful in our experience. So in any disputes, let's say it's a contractual dispute, it could be IP or non-IP related, then arbitration will be a quick way to resolve these issues. In conclusion, next slide, please. We always advise clients to make use of the IP system in the Philippines to protect their investments, especially in the construction industry, because the investments there could be in the millions or billions of pesos. That will be all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Edmund, for this insightful presentation as well. I will now be inviting both Edmund and Michael back to the floor to answer questions we have received from the audience. Also, if you still have any question as of now, please feel free to send them to us using the question box on the panel in front of you. One of the first questions we received is addressed to Mr. Michael. What were the biggest challenges you encountered when you first started in the Philippines, and how did you deal with these? Should I repeat the question, Michael? Something must be going wrong there as well. The question was, what were the biggest challenges you encountered when you first started in the Philippines, and how did you deal with these? Okay, we'll move on to another question for the time being. Maybe one for Edmund right now. So the EPBN has mentioned before many trade fairs coming up to the Philippines, and I've been told this is a prime spot for IP infringement. How can I best protect my inventions on trade fairs while still getting the most out of it in terms of business contracts?
Okay, my advice is don't join trade fairs if you have not applied for a patent application for your inventions or for your utility models or industrial designs. Because by joining these trade fairs, you are actually making public your technology. So anyone who's there sees your technology, maybe get some samples or take some pictures. They could reverse engineer that, and they could make their own products, or yeah, they could make their own products. And unfortunately, you have no recourse against them. You have no cause of action against them if you don't have a patent for that. So that's my advice. Protect your IP first before joining these trade fairs.
Because sometimes patent invention protection can take, the registration process can take up to let's say 3 years. So EU SMEs should already be starting to delve into IPR protection before even setting their first meeting, would you say, in the Philippines?
Exactly. Yes. Even when you're searching for investors, when you discuss your business plans, we already advise that before you go to that step, protect your IP first, file your patent application first, or at the very least, when you speak to them, ask them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, or which will include a provision that says that they acknowledge that you are the owner of this technology that you are presenting to them, because that will bind them later on if you find out that they somehow reverse engineered and made their own products based on your technology.
So on trade fairs, you would also say that you should not be too visible with, let's say, sketches on how your invention works. Would you say like that?
Right. Although it depends on who you're talking to, because for some interested parties, they just might be interested in the end result, what your technology does, but they're not really interested in how it works. So depends on who you talk to. But in general, yeah, in trade fairs, maybe you don't have to disclose how your technology works. You just tell them what it does. And then, if someone asks you, how does this work? Can we have a meeting on this? Then that's when you can probably give some details. But again, before going to that meeting, make sure that you protect your IP first.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for this. Michael, have you rejoined us on the webinar platform? I do not hear a response from him now.
Must be the weather, Mitch.
It might be, yeah, it's either the internet that might be working with us or it's not my day.
I think both.
Probably both, yes. Edmund, another question for you in the meantime. So this company says it's already operating in Southeast Asia. And is there any way this might ever, through one way or another, benefit them for their registration in the Philippines? Is there like a highway if you are already operating in Asian countries, or how does this work?
Okay. There is a move to have an ASEAN patent, but it's not in place yet. So people are just thinking of having an ASEAN patent, meaning if you get a patent in the Philippines, then you're deemed to have a patent in the rest of the ASEAN region. But we don't have that right now. So if, let's say, you already have presence in Thailand, in Indonesia or Singapore, and then you want to come to the Philippines and you're bringing in your products, you have to register your IP in the Philippines. So have it patented in the Philippines, or if you're a trademark, then have your trademarks registered in the Philippines. But there is a way of cutting costs. Let's say if you have a new invention and then you want patent protection in many countries, not just ASEAN, but maybe other countries around the world, then there is a way to cut costs by by filing what we call an international patent application under the PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty. So if you file a patent application using the PCT, then you're deemed to have filed an application in the 200 plus countries that are members of the PCT. So I can provide details. I just send me an email on how to do that.
So this would allow you to, let's say, both file a patent at the same time in, let's say, the Philippines, Singapore, China, the UK, the US.
Yeah.
All right.
Because all of those countries that you mentioned are members of the PCT.
And this will also mean that once granted, it's granted at the same time in all these countries?
No, there's a catch. The PCT is just a filing system, so it's just the grant will still depend on the patent office of each country. So there's what we call a national phase. So at some point, you have to decide whether you really want to get a patent in the countries, the 200 plus countries that are members of the PCT. So you select, and then you enter what we call the national phase. And there will be requirements for each, specific requirements for each country. But what it does is it shortens the first stage, which is the filing and then the publication. So it's done centrally. So you don't have to repeat what we call the formalities and publication in each of the countries where you want to get the patent. So that's all taken care of at the international level or PCT level. So it really cuts the costs.
And this will be the duration of this filing system. This will be for how many years, or is this?
It's almost universal. It's really 20 years from filing. So if you file a PCT application and then you enter the national phase, let's say in 10 countries, your protection will still be 20 years from the time of the international application, filing of the international application.
I see. Thank you for that. Michael, have you now rejoined us on the webinar platform? I will just try once more.
Yes, I am on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the first question that I have for you is that what were the biggest challenges you encountered when you first joined the Philippines, and how did you deal with these? Or when
wow, that goes along many years back. And the biggest challenge when I started my business here in the Philippines, that the whole concept of freight forwarding hadn't reached the Philippines yet. So I could claim to be one of the pioneers of developing freight forwarding and logistics here. What you had here was an American model of customs brokers who also did do some documentation on freight. And throughout, of course, the challenges always were integrity or corruption. In the meantime, there has been a big change with respect to giving importance to integrity. And by the way, this is only a development here in developing countries and in the Philippines in particular. I still remember from my home country, Germany, where I'm from, that until the end of the 70s, bribes given in foreign countries were tax-deductible expenses of companies. In the meantime, that is of course shunned upon, and also here in the Philippines we have movements. By the way, also in other ASEAN countries, in particularly Indonesia, very effectively. Non-government organizations and government organizations to trying to clean up the business. So that is one of the challenges you have. Of course, competition. I mean, this time going on, competition has been growing here in the Philippines, but our business model is such that it is based on differentiation and investments. We have invested quite a lot of money here in the Philippines and differentiated ourselves in that way. So we prospered. And as I said, by and large, the challenges are there, but you can overcome these challenges with understanding of the culture you are entering business into, and patience. You have to bring that, and you have to be careful in selecting your partners. If you have good partners, supportive partners, and you bring patience and you bring the willingness to understand other cultures, then you can be very successful here in this environment.
Okay, thank you. You just mentioned competition, and I would like to tie in into that with one of the other questions we received. What would you say are big countries of origin for competitors to European companies in the Philippines? I think, although not explicitly stated, this question also relates to the China factor.
Well, obviously, I mean, we have seen phases where Europe and the United States were the lead suppliers of machineries and equipment and projects. That then shifted to Japan and Korea. That then shifted to Taiwan. And now it shifted to China, and quite a lot of infrastructure development, power stations, coal power stations, and so on, are emanating from China. But that is also not a specific phenomenon limited to the Philippines or to ASEAN or to Asia, because if you look at the United States or Europe also, most of equipment is actually fabricated and supplied from China. So China is very competitive, obviously, up to now. But if you look very carefully, the cost of doing business in China is also rising. So competitiveness is returning also to European companies.
Okay, thank you for this. Let's do 2 questions more. There's plenty of more I can ask, but with regards to the time, for Edmund once more. So you just talked about patents, and you also mentioned non-patentable invention. Is there any alternative to these patents? Is there any alternative to protect these non-patentable inventions?
If it's non-patentable, but maybe it could be a trade secret. Enforcement is a little bit difficult because if you're trying to enforce a trade secret, that means your secret is really out there in the open. But again, just look at the example of Coke. The formula for Coke, they didn't patent it. They decided to just keep it to themselves. So until now, Coke, the formula for Coke is a $1 billion secret. So you could do the same. I mean, if you don't want to disclose your technologies, if you just want to keep it to your company, then you could protect this as a trade secret. And the way to protect that is to make sure that anyone who has access to the trade secret or to the technology that you want protected will make sure that they execute non-disclosure agreements or ensure that only very few individuals really know the entire process or the entire technology, so that it will not be easy to disclose it to competitors, for example. But other than that, if it falls under the non-patentable inventions, then unfortunately, there's no way to protect them.
Okay, thank you for clarifying this. Michael, one final question for you as well. In the beginning, you mentioned the Philippines, the benefits of an island nation for tourism specifically. But how does this work for infrastructure? Is this not a hindrance for the development of infrastructure?
I don't understand the question. Why the development of tourism should be a hindrance?
I think. Sorry, the question is the characteristic as an island nation. Is that a hindrance for construction of infrastructure?
Well, it is more difficult to deliver goods in general in an island nation than on a land-based nation, of course. But we have a very well-developed domestic transportation network, and therefore it is not really a hindrance. No. To the opposite, I mean, being an island, being an archipelago with many beautiful islands, exactly gives a lot of opportunities to discover very beautiful scenes and very beautiful locations in the country. I mean, it is an attraction of Indonesia, Malaysia to some degree, and again, the Philippines, that it has 7,000 plus islands. So I think for tourism, it is more of an opportunity to be an island nation than it is a hindrance or a problem.
Okay, thank you. With this and with in light of the time, I will move on to conclude today's webinar. I would like to briefly turn your attention to the Southeast Asian country fact sheets available for download from the Southeast Asia IPR SME Helpdesk website, where you can find any information on the Philippines you might need, as well as all other Southeast Asian countries. For more updates about our services or upcoming events, please have a look at our website and social media channels, which you can see in front of you. Then I would like to let you know that once more that all of our webinars are recorded and will be uploaded together with the full PowerPoint presentation online. This will include additional information for the IPR section regarding copyright and trademarks, which were excluded for this specific webinar. To make sure we kept in the time frame of this webinar. Massive thank you to all of our presenters, as well as Fidel Ventura from EPBN for cooperating with us, as well as, of course, you, the audience, for joining this webinar and your continued interest in the EPBN and the Southeast Asia IPR SME Helpdesk. We hope to see you all again soon, for example, on our upcoming webinar on July 13th, an introduction to the WIPO Center services and mechanics for mediation. More information on this you can find on our website. And with this, I hope you have a good afternoon or evening when you are based in Asia. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Edmund. Thank you, Fidel, also for joining me today once more.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you also.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.